All right, what is up, you people? Thanks for coming back. Thanks for supporting the channel. I love to hear you guys' comments below. As you can see in the picture today, I'm gonna talk about Luka versus Trae Young. All right, so this is a debate to me that has debate. It really does, but at the same time, the debate is the, the debate is so one sided because of how one other player started. And I just really want to get this off my chest because, look, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'm an Atlanta Hawks fan. I live in Atlanta. But my opinion is as unbiased as is unbiased as it can be when it comes to these two players, because I don't look at Trae Young and just support him because I'm an Atlanta Hawks fan and I live in Atlanta, right? So I just want to get that out the way, okay? So I'm gonna make some points that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about, and they are very important points. And, and I just want to give you guys another perspective as to why I think ultimately Trae Young is the better player over Luka Doncic, or at least that the trade that the Hawks did with the Mavericks has teetered in the Atlanta Hawks way. Okay, so let's get to it. Luka started off at a very good, at a very good pace. He started off on fire. He started off making these shots. He started making these step back threes. He started sizzling. You name it. He had a great start to his career. Trae Young, it wasn't terrible, but it obviously wasn't, what all the hype was coming out of Oklahoma. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to talk about. Number one, Luka Doncic had already been exposed to professional basketball, albeit it's in Europe, it's in Spain, which many consider to be the second best league behind the NBA. But he had already been exposed to grown men, right? Like it was grown men, big bodies, it was strength, it was, bodies. So he had already been exposed to all of that, right? Early in his career. I mean, probably since I think he was 16, he had already been exposed to that. So this was nothing new to him. Obviously, the level of basketball was probably higher. But if you're a good player, you're still gonna shine. Whether you have not so many good players, whether it be the second best league or the first best league. Like Luka was hyped to be that good of a player. So obviously the transition to me is a little bit easier on that perspective. It really just comes to, are you used to, playing against grown men? And Luka had already had that type of exposure. Whereas on the other hand, Trae Young, he did not have that exposure. He was playing against other college students, which, 18, 19, they're still kids, right? Like they still are kids. Their bodies haven't matured, into a grown adult body yet. You can also make the argument that a lot of those college kids probably won't make the NBA, right? So the level is just different. And what I mean by that is basically the level is not as high, and the weight difference between the younger kids' bodies versus grown men, just different, right? So Trae Young coming into the league, the exposure was different. It was an adjustment. All of a sudden, these athletes were faster. All of a sudden, these athletes were playing defense on him more tightly. They were, bodying him up. They were trying to rough him up. They were trying to use their body, trying to clash onto him, trying to send a message to him. And Trae Young, not that he was bad, it's just he needed to adjust, right? Like there's a period of adjustment. There's a period of, okay, I'm seeing what they're giving me and I don't have it yet, but the more I see it, the more I'm exposed to it, the more I'm going to get comfortable, with such things. So I believe that was what Trae Young went on went through early in the season, and as soon as he was able to get up to speed, as soon as he was able to, okay, this is how it works, this is what we're doing, bam, you saw the real Trae Young, which was like around January, like mid early January. You saw the real Trae Young, and that's who I believe he really is, early in his career. Now, the second point I want to make is the teams, right? You have the Atlanta Hawks and you have the Dallas Mavericks. Look, the Dallas Mavericks, whether you like it or not, they had a better team around Luka early on in the season, right? Which was when his numbers were popping off. They had DeAndre Jordan, they had Wesley Matthews, they had Dennis Smith Jr., they had Harrison Barnes at the time. They had a pretty, it wasn't terrible, I mean, it was a lot better than what the Hawks had. Like, the Hawks had, people know them now, right? Because Trae Young, the Hawks started playing better. But at the time, if you weren't an Atlanta Hawks fan, you really weren't up to speed with John Collins or DeAndre Bembry, and he's still like a question mark, right? You still weren't up to speed with Kevin Horter. You still weren't up to speed with Alex Len. Like, these guys who are, pretty good now because they've been playing better recently. At the time, nobody knew about them. Nobody was talking about them. You compare those two teams, and you would easily say the Dallas Mavericks had a better team, right? So at the time, Luka wasn't getting double teamed. He was getting those assists because even when he was, even if he was getting double teamed, he had other players to take some of the load off of Luka, right? He had a Harrison Barnes to pass to. He had a Wesley Matthews. He had a DeAndre Jordan to alley-oop to, right? So it just made it a whole lot easier on Luka to come in and just not face such harsh defenses day in and day out. Whereas Trae Young, he was basically the only offense for the Atlanta Hawks. Everything went through him, and it's a lot easier to say and a lot harder to do. Everybody wants, play the ball through me, play the ball through me. But then when it actually happens, you start getting a little bit exposed because all of a sudden you're not that good. And all of a sudden, even when you pass it to open teammates, they're not making the shot, you don't get that assist. You don't get that recognition, right? Trae Young was basically the only offense for the Atlanta Hawks, and he was still able to ball. Obviously after the transition period, but he was still able to give it to them. And not only that, he made his teammates better. He made his teammates known. The simple fact that now you are aware of a John Collins, now you're aware of Alex Len, a DeAndre Bembry, Kevin Horter, the list goes on and on. The simple fact that you know these guys is because Trae Young made them better. He gave up the ball. Like he said before, his favorite player is Steve Nash. Well, it's not hard to see that he has a little bit of Steve Nash in him in his passing, his vision. You can see that Trae Young has Steve Nash in him, and the fact that he was able to uplift these guys and lead his team close to a 500 record pretty much after the All-Star break, to me is a heck of an accomplishment. And Luka, I know he's still great, but he had, whether it's fair or not, he had a better team to start off, and it was just an easier transition. He had a better team to start off. He had already been exposed to a grown man type of game. I mean, it was basically just, how good am I against these guys? Am I really this good? It was just basically competition, like level-wise, basketball IQ-wise. That's all he was facing. Whereas Trae Young had to make all the types of adjustments, and boy, has he made those adjustments. So I want to put those points out there to say, after all is said and done, I think Trae Young is the better player. I think Trae Young has a higher ceiling because of the points I just mentioned. I think he's in a great team, in a great surrounding, has a great GM, knows what they're doing. And I just think Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks got the better of this trade. And that's all I wanted to say. So thanks for listening, guys, and I hope you have a great day. Please subscribe to the channel.